Some discoveries about our past raise more questions than answers, and in this area archaeology is most certainly the science of choice. We no longer count today the artifacts unearthed having totally changed our vision of the world, our history where our certainties. One of the major interests of these discoveries is in particular the fact of pushing us to recognize that we do not know anything about our past, our origins, and what that there could well have been before the factual traces that our species has left dating back only a few millennia. Among these discoveries nourishing both our imagination and our amnesia, we can of course cite the artifacts included, objects manufactured, work and transformed by man, or at least by a form intelligence other than the natural elements. So until then you will tell me there is nothing very strange in finding objects worked by the human hand, of course. But when the techniques used and the information contained in these artifacts are totally anachronistic with the eras supposed of their realization, we are entitled to question ourselves and to glimpse our past differently than that imposed in the history books. If this channel regularly mentions some of these objects in these videos, we will offer you a little top 10 unexplained artifacts, some sort of light intellectual and spiritual appetizer that will perhaps open for some people the gates of the past. The slab of Mana. It is a stone slab of 40 centimeters by 30 discovered in Ecuador in 1984 among more than 300 mysterious artifacts not corresponding to any culture pre-Columbian known. The slab of Mana is a map of the world engraved in the stone representing the North and South American continents, Europe, Asia, Africa and the ocean. But there are two unknown land areas, two potential forgotten continents. The first is located in the North Atlantic offshore east coasts of the United States and could therefore be assimilated to Atlantis, and the second lost continent is in the Pacific Ocean off America Central and could for its part be assimilated to Mo. The slab of Mana therefore represents a complete map of the world as we know it today, with two major continents disappeared. We will also note on this terrestrial representation carved in stone a line of natural quartz. As sure it is that I am white with a red eye appears clearly. It is placed in a geopolitical zone man's very sensitive today, the Middle East, and more precisely in the region of Israel, but for security reasons I will not linger more above. Anyway, the slab of Mana seems to be probably the oldest complete map of our planet, indicating all known continents and even more plains north of Bogota. These small pre-Columbian artifacts officially dating from the 5th century and more are Zamar jewelry made of gold alloy and cure. If the realization of these objects does not seem to be the source of questioning, it is indeed their appearance that will raise the most questions. At first glance it may seem that her gold jewelry represents insects or birds, but with a post-World War II look, you have to admit that we can frankly see a representation of planes, modern, not to say space shuttle. This visual sensation is particularly accentuated by the streamlined shape of the wings, but especially by the vertical fin placed on the tail of the artifact. This type of fin is not found in nature in birds, for example, which sports a tail horizontal but never vertical. FOM tests in the wind tunnel as well as on reconstructions in model aircraft have shown that the design of its aircraft in Norte de Bogotá was perfectly aerodynamic and had excellent wear years as well as a very good penetration in the air. This characteristic is contemporary of modern aerial devices from one generic itself. This resemblance to airplanes or space shuttle can therefore suggest that the makers of these objects over 1,500 years old rubbed shoulders with a technology that was totally beyond that attributed to them. Nebra disc. This art is made mysterious, found in Germany, is dated 3600, has already been the subject of a video on this channel being entirely dedicated to him. It therefore seemed normal that they appear in the top 10 inexplicable artifacts. The Nebra disc is therefore a bronze disc weighing 2 kilos for 1 meter of diameter. It is out of mint and many gold ornament representing stars, a sun, a moon, a solar boat and 2 side bands. One can also note 39 holes distributed over its entire perimeter, all spaced about an inch apart. What is mysterious about this disc? This is not its realization in itself but the information it contains. Indeed, we will note many correlations with stars of our solar system, but also with many constellations, and in particular the Pleiades over the 39 holes of sound perimeter can be related to the orbits of our many nearby planets such as Mars and Venus in particular, as well as with the female gestation cycle. The two side bends for their part make your identified and precisely mark solstices at the very location of Nebra. However, as Marshall Callan intelligently pointed out in one of the video comments, all these correlations do not result knowledge other than simple factual observations that can be made at that time with the naked eye and without technology, but the realization of such an artifacts bringing together all of his astronomical, mathematical and geometric knowledge and biological are proof of the breadth of knowledge of this period, which therefore seems much greater than what we want to grant them. The statuettes, oko statues and stockings as bars, were discovered from 1944 to Mexico. These are small earthenware statuettes cooked, representing among other things dinosaurs and other creatures mysterious. The most intriguing in these statuettes is certainly the fact that many of them show humans interacting with dinosaurs. We note for example the very famous rider of the Triceratops, where we can clearly distinguish a man dressed as a warrior riding a magnificent Triceratops. The Dagon statuettes bar were discovered by a peasant from the region. However, this man, extremely poor, were very little cultivated, illiterate. The probability that they have had the necessary knowledge to carry out the different morphologically very precise figures sometimes concerning certain types of dinosaurs is therefore more than doubtful. The quantity of wood needed for cooking these hundreds of clay figurines absolutely would not have made this operation profitable. It may also be noted that fragments of similar pottery were found in the construction of the walls of one of the oldest houses in village, whose construction dates back to well before the birth of the peasant being at the origin of this discovery. If we add the Decumbus statuettes Rohat Pierre Dick to it, would seem that the south of the American continent is a real passion for ancient representations where men interact with dinosaurs. Piri Reis map. This artifact is not really a big surprise in the top 10 of this chain, since it has already been mentioned in many videos, yet the Piri Reis map is indeed part of the artifacts anachronistic. Among the most surprising to take up the main points of this artifact, this is a map made in 1513 by a Turkish admiral, Piri Miz. This map shows the coasts of the continents surrounding the Atlantic Ocean, and in particular the African coasts of Central America, of South America, but also the north of the Antarctic continent, still officially unknown to the time. And more, the representation of this Antarctic zone is devoid of ice. The accuracy of the information contained in this document is also extremely disturbing, but other points are just as intriguing, as for example the fact that if the latitude was already known and used in the 5th century, the map of Piri Reis also indicates the longitude, which it will not officially determined and applied only 200 years later. As for the periphery of the represented continent, if the line can appear different from the one we are used to seeing on our planes this make modern, it is necessary to know that this is related to the type mapping, because the Piri Reis map is not a common planisphere but a map drawn from a central point like our maps of modern submariners. This map would not be the original work of the Turkish admiral but a copy of copies of copies, possibly dating back to an unknown time when the creators of this information had knowledge and information about our planet which far exceeds the one we had in the 16th century. The blocks in age of Pomapamcu, located in Bolivia near the shores of the Lake Titicaca at more than 3,800 meters above sea level. The pre-Columbian site of Palmapacu is a vast complex where only huge blocks remain today, stones with very particular geometric shapes. We note in particular the now famous H-shaped blocks of Pomapamp. These stone blocks made of andesite have the reputation of affirming the presence of the master, but precise measurements of have quantified between 98 and 100 centimeters, and we cannot not assert that it clearly marks a metric system. Blocks in age of Kumas bridge coasts are 8 in number, and it demonstrates, just like other stones of this site, a precise and rigorous work of realization with a drawing extremely particular and and geometrical made up of corbellings and angles. Officially, these blocks are part of a set of stones having formerly constitute a monumental pre-Columbian temple. To date, totally destroyed my personal hypothesis on these blocks, which is not based on any concrete evidence but only on a feeling, and that these H blocks could be an architectural part of colossal hinge allowing to operate gigantic doors like the blocks of this site. This idea can be supported by the number of blocks in H, since there are exactly 8. Very little for a texture of this size, but which could serve as a even numbers will corroborate the hinge hypothesis. Loses twice 4 tanks, but the particular shape of the crucibles of the H shapes would allow to fit the other part of the hinges, allowing the system rotation is thus the opening and closing of any doors of the ancient complex. While waiting for this hypothesis where other is confirmed, the mystery remains whole concerning these blocks, that it is on their achievements, their age or their function. The Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas, also called the Bible. The Bible is a literally monumental work whose figures scroll. Understandably, it measures 97 centimeters high, 50 centimeters wide, for 22 centimeters thick, and a weight of 75 kilograms. It initially contained 320 pages in calfskin, requiring nearly 260 animals for its realization. If these figures make you dizzy, the history of this extraordinary work is even stranger. The Codex Gigas would have been written in the 13th century by a Bohemian Benedictine monk, but in a single chip, being threatened by his hierarchy of being walled up alive for having broken his monastic vows. Lemoyne would then have proposed to realize in one night a book containing all the knowledge of the time, but will be so glad it turned out to be impossible. Lemoyne asked the devil for help to complete this infernal task by exchange of his soul. Is thus that in a single night the Codex Gigas was entirely produced. The Devil's Bible includes the Old and the New Testament, a register of medical knowledge, a chronicle of Boeing, a calendar, and a gigantic representation of most intriguing devil himself, being perhaps that analyses have shown that the ink used for the full realization of this work was strictly identical, yet the logical realization of such a work would have required hundreds, even thousands of hours of work, and given the fact that at that time the scribes make their own ink to make their calligraphy, and others in a minute, the formulas were continuously different if nothing, and can therefore officially affirm that the Codex Gigas was beautiful and well written in one night. Nothing seems to be able either demonstrate the opposite, and the diabolical mystery that surrounds the Bible of Devil remains whole. The Pirano, this more than recognizable artifact, is one of the few 300 objects found in a cave in Ecuador in 1995 not corresponding to no pre-Columbian culture known. The shape of this object can hardly left room for ambiguity. It is a small pyramid of a few centimeters in height at the seating at its top, and this image immediately refers to the Illuminati symbol and a legendary pyramid surmounted by an eye that is readable on dollar bills. For example, this small object is a real source of mystery and questions if the Mesoamerican pyramids are exclusively tiered monuments and not smooth like the pyramids of Egypt. We will note with this artifact a undeniable resemblance to the architectural works of North Africa. We may also note that the lines drawing building bricks of this object are 13 in number, but another intriguing fact is still add to this long list. The underside of this object is marked with a representation and of a series of symbols. The succession of U represents the constellation of Orion, also extremely important in Egypt ancient, and the symbols are still unknown today, but the translations of Professor Kurt Schillingmann, eminent German linguist, note that this text urges this price proves meant the son of the creator comes the Pyramid of Mana, and therefore undeniably a strange artifact and mysterious that does not meet any of the Mesoamerican criteria and enters correlation with a multitude of modern and planetary facts, making this one-eyed pyramid a true anachronistic artifact. By glue genetics, this disc 27 centimeters in diameter for 2 kilos and made of the aforementioned a rock extremely discovered in Colombia but not corresponding to any culture still known pre-Columbian. It is therefore very difficult to be able to date the realization of this object, just as it is always impossible to say whether it is a genuine coin or a fraud. The Columbia genetic disc is engraved on its entire surface, front and back, of multiple extremely precise representations retracing in particular the evolution of life since the fertilization of the otta feminine until birth. We can see in particular faithful representations of male and female gametes, ova and spermatozoa yet invisible to the naked eye, as well as cell multiplication and even a fetus at different stages of development. We will also note the representation of male and female characters as well than that of a child, allowing to conclude the cycle of birth. However, a major question may arise in view of the representations of this artifact. The two humanoids indeed has a head with an unusual appearance and have the little human. If it is not a stylistic peculiarity, we could obviously make a connection between the morphology of these beings and possible extraterrestrials well known nowadays. The little Greece in any event. Cellular biological representations and knowledge necessary for the realization of this genetic disk requires the use of technologies and tools to see the microscopic. But while waiting to be able to say if yes where one this disk comes from a forgotten civilization or if it is not that of a vulgar counterfeit, questions are as big as the knowledge they demonstrate. The Goni structure located in the southwest of Japan near the island of Taiwan. The underwater structure of Yonaguni is a huge complex submerged more than 20 meters deep. This fertilizer platform, discovered in 1985, measures 75 meters long for 25 meters high, and it consists of a succession of horizontal lines of geometric shapes and angular structures, leaving little luck in a natural formation. One can notably observe horizontal structured with right angles but also paths approach and complex angular detail. Some people count giant statues with human or animal faces that can even be likened to Easter Island Moai statues, but to be totally honest, personally, I never clearly saw anything good proving anyway. The underwater structure of Ganagobia is a complex, very large submerged, which always generates many questions. If this formation is indeed artificial, it would mean that it dates at least from the last ice age, a time when the ocean level is beautiful at its lowest. The place of Yonaguni could be found in the open air and therefore be worked by the hand of man. What the attraction, at least at 12,000 years for me, and it is not yet at times from my personal view, not based on any evidence or studies official. The underwater structure of Yonaguni is not a construction but a career. Indeed, the visual of this site gives the impression that the blocks of stones they were extracted as rectangular sandstone slabs level by level. It could therefore be a stone mining site, but at a time when no construction of this magnitude is yet known. As you will have understood, the underwater structure of Yonaguni will still keep its mysteries for many years. This is obviously only a tiny part of these mysterious objects, of these unexplained artifacts, and everyone can make their own list by according to its degrees of importance of mystery or revelations. But there will be always a criterion that we must never forget, that of the dream of seeing our past other than as this long straight line, this ladder continuous and monotonous, to introduce this light veil of the mystery of the unknown and to give our brain all the freedom to create its own truth. Music.